Hello, welcome to IBC Podcast, the podcast where we take news that has happened around the world and we debate them, sharing our own points of view as well as other people's that you may not have heard. This week we are trying something a little bit different. We are talking about single-use plastics, a topic that doesn't come from the news necessarily, but is a big issue in the world today. The way these types of podcasts are going to go is that we will say a stat and then we will talk about that stat simply. So I've got a stat right here. This is the first one I'm going to talk about. Out of the 380 million tons of plastic that is produced every year, some reports indicate that up to 50% of that is used for single-use purposes. What do you make of that, lads?
Yeah, so 50% is obviously that's a massive integer right there. And to think, that governments are they're saying they're combating plastic, where 50% being such a high margin, I think they don't have the right to say that.
Yeah. In a world where we preach about reducing and reusing and recycling, the fact that 50% of 380 million tons is just being used once and then put into landfill.
It kind of just makes you think, why in this modern day and age we have modern medicine, we're having rights for literally everyone, everyone's getting rights, the world is changing so much, yet like that statistic just said, 50% of all our plastic yearly is going to single-use plastic, which is mind-boggling because that's a high number to be going to just being single-use. You would only use it once. 50% of all plastic created. When you think about plastics broadly, everything almost is plastic. Like when you think about normal plastic, like Lego, for example, not single-use, but it is plastic nonetheless. Other things.
That's what the other half. That's type of stuff that the other half would
use
make up.
Yeah, a lot of things that use plastic. Yet,
and
50% of it, of all plastic created, is going to single use.
Yeah. The 50%. It might not seem like a big number. It is a big number, but that's just a percentage. In terms of raw numbers, we're looking at 160 or 140 million tons per year.
And that's all going to landfill and all going some of it into the sea. It's just not very good, is it?
Yeah, it's actually mind-boggling how big those numbers are. Really, they just go into the ground or the ocean.
This is kind of a form of propaganda, the way the government are saying how they're doing well and they're combating it and how it's going to get better. Whereas you hit us with these numbers and these percentages, it just doesn't make me feel in the way that everything's going to get better.
Yeah.
So when you look at single-use plastics by itself, it's a very good topic to talk about because you have to look at both sides. You have the single-use side, which is bad. We all know single-use plastics are bad. But then you have the other side, but you have to think they're also very efficient, very easy to use, and also very cheap. Plastic is very cheap to create. So
is it worth?
Would use it over tin can, for example, because tin or aluminium that they use it for is a lot more expensive than plastic.
Yeah,
and also I feel like at this stage humanity depends on the use of plastics.
Yeah, would that use of plastic is it worth the cost of pollution getting into the water and into the land and everything? Is it worth it?
I mean, I don't think so, because for instance, some disadvantages of plastics, it obviously hurts the environment. But it can also cause stuff like acid rain, which is really, really bad for the environment in places. Obviously, ocean polluting, global warming. It can also hinder crop growth in countries when we're dumping plastics in the soil. It can increase soil pollution.
So, going along with the single-use plastics, another thing we have to talk about is plastic takes years, and I mean years to decompose.
It never actually truly decomposes.
Yeah, it's hard to think about where we'd put it, because if we just keep creating plastic, we keep throwing it away, we're running out of room to store all this plastic, and it's not really good to live in a place that's full of plastic.
Yeah.
For example, the Pacific garbage patch is full. There's been times where it's just been absolutely jam packed full of plastic, and that's a really bad thing, because if you think about it, plastic's quite a new in terms of invention. If you go back to maybe the 1800s, they probably wouldn't have had plastic that much, nor and if you go back even further, it probably weren't even invented. It's very modern plastic, because you can see with I don't have the statistic with me, but you can see with, if you look at any graph, it maybe from the 1900s to now, the plastic will have increased, the use of single-use plastics, because it's kind of written into our minds. We're wired to think plastic, always plastic. You know, you buy let's say you go down to your local shop and you buy a drink, for example. You'd never think when you're buying it, oh, what about this plastic I'm actually using? You're always thinking, oh, I'm going to drink it and then throw it away. You're not thinking
it's one of those things,
where the bottle goes
one of those
after you
things
throw it
where
away.
it's one of those things where you're on the go. It's easy it's just right there.
It's convenient.
Yeah. Also, I've just looked it up. Plastic actually takes 220 to 500 years to decompose.
Yeah, which is crazy long time. And also, you got to think about some of that stage of decomposing. It goes into smaller microplastics, which is incredibly bad for the ocean. More bad than plastic bags.
Yeah. Also, it's interesting here. I've just looked up as well. Plastic was only actually invented in 1907.
Yeah, that's right.
So even the Victorians wouldn't have plastic.
No, it's a so even then it was invented in 1907. It became really broadly used probably around the 50s and 60s. That's when they started using plastic for such things as bottles, and also bags. Everything started becoming plastic, really, because it's a very efficient, cheap, easy, sturdy, very good source, and it's quite broad. You can get plastic from almost everywhere. If you look nowadays, though, I can assure you, if you walk down the street even, you can see some sort of plastic. That's how much it's gone. That's how much plastic has become. You can literally even go down the street and see at least one bit of plastic. You can look around your room, at least, and just see one bit of plastic.
Yeah.
Wherever you go, there's plastic.
And
that's crazy, because if you think about it, 1907 was when it was invented, which is 2021, just over 100 years, and you can see it absolutely everywhere.
Yeah. Also, another statistic, which I think is absolutely awful. Apparently, total plastic created, 8 million tons of plastic ends up in the ocean annually, which is completely awful.
Yeah, things like the Pacific garbage patch and all that. The fact that how many million was it?
8 million.
8 million was it per year
million.
into the ocean?
Yeah, 8 million tons of plastic in the ocean a year.
Yeah, that is appalling.
Yeah, and think about this. That's the entire oceanic ecosystem getting decimated by people who shouldn't really be affecting them. Like animals who live deep in the ocean, they should not be affected by humans at all, yet they are.
Yeah.
It's just
just going back to, I have another stat that leads on from the first stat that I had. Is that out of the 360 million, out of the 50% of the single-use plastic, only 9% is actually recycled.
Yeah.
So that's even worse.
Yeah.
Because single-use plastics, they're not I don't know, how should I even say it? To be honest, it's a bit appalling.
Yeah. I mean, another point of how plastic can can be like quite useless is apparently in bottled water, 45% of it is tap water. 45% of bottled water is just filtered tap water. So 45 of your drink you're going to get from Tesco's, 45% of that you could just get from the tap, which is using no plastic. It's like it's completely unnecessary.
So I've just brung up some more statistics, and this is crazy. So, for example, we'll start off with the lowest one: a cigarette filter. So a part of the cigarette that filters out the tobacco bit. 10 years to break down. 10 years. It takes a decade just for that little bit to break down.
Something that we don't even need.
We'll then move over to the next one. Plastic bags. They take 20 years. You buy a plastic bag, 5p, you don't think about it. 20 years, 2 decades that takes to break down.
Yeah.
And then here's a bigger one. A coffee cup. You go buy a cup of coffee, that's 3 decades that's going to take to break down. 3 decades, and it gets even bigger from there. For example, next up is plastic cutlery, 100 years. Plastic straws, 200 years. Plastic bottles, 450 years. And then styrofoam never decomposes.
Yeah.
And the point of the cigarette, what are they called?
It's that filter out the
filter.
Oh, yes, okay. So those, if you go on like Margate Beach or Westbrook, wherever, and you look on the sand, you can see them everywhere. Almost every step you take, you can see another pit. It's everywhere.
Yeah, all of this for people who can't be bothered using reusable cutlery, and/or people who can't be bothered just getting water straight from a tap.
So
and/or people who want to fill their lungs with harmful chemicals.
So someone's done a survey of a beach in Britain. On that beach, they found 225.3. This is only in 100 meters, by the way. 225.3 plastic and / polystyrene pieces. They found 40.4 glass items, 42.3 packets, 34.5 cigarette stubs, 32.9 caps and lids, 27.4 wet wipes, 18 lengths of fishing line, 31 pieces of string / cord, 26.9 cotton bud sticks, and 18 cutlery trays straws. So that is only in 100 meters of a beach. 100 meters on that beach. 100 meters they found all that.
Who even leaves a cotton bud in a beach in the first place?
The main figure I want to point out: 225.3 plastic. That's how much plastic they found in 100 meters.
It's awful, Matt.
That is awful.
Really, especially as a nature, something that's supposed to bring in tourists, they ruin it. Like
100 meters.
Something, it's not even. That's not even counting like all of the beaches. That's just a small handful.
Our lap of the school running track, that's 400 meters.
Yeah, you could find 3
This
times.
Is a quarter of that. A quarter of that running, they found 225.3 plastic / polystyrene pieces. In 1 area.
Another point is in England, there's a lot of landfill sites. Apparently this here says there's about 500 landfill sites in the UK. Now, living near a landfill site can cause birth defects, low birth weight, and cancers sometimes, and we're filling up our country with them. We live on an island. Eventually, we're going to run out of room. Like, eventually, this is going to be such a big problem that it can't be ignored anymore.
Yeah.
And this is where we have to look at the UK affects it a lot more. Is the pure fact that big one really is we export a lot of our waste to other countries. So
China, Turkey,
China, for example, which we don't export any more to China, but we did for a long time, and it's it's not getting rid of the issue, it's moving it.
Yeah.
For the main reason Harry said, the main reason is we don't want it here, so we chuck it off to another country. Doesn't mean the plastic just disappears. Doesn't mean we should think about it completely out of our minds. See, the only way there's a few ways we can stop this. So personally, you can stop this happening by reusing and buying less stuff made out of plastic. So for example, instead of going and buying a plastic milk carton, going and filling up milk, for example, from if shops could offer that, that would be good.
Or delivery of like milk delivered in glass.
I don't agree with the glass though, because the glass, one, it's dangerous because it's glass, and two, that's going to release pollution into the air when you're trying to shape and make that glass. So
they could try and find alternatives. You can't make it out of paper because that would just be pathetic.
I think maybe you should
bamboo.
Yeah, maybe you should get one glass bottle or a couple glass bottles, depending on this family size, and you have to reuse those glass bottles.
So bamboo it grows quick. It's sturdy. The only downside to it is it costs more to make than plastics. But I think the only way to sort out all this is if the government takes action. And we need to get the attention of the government. Because if the government sorts it out, everything's gonna start happening. If the government makes it that to try and help this, they might be able to give businesses more money or give them discounts or less tax if they use bamboo, for example, or supply less plastic. Because if they need that money to be able to buy the bamboo, the government should be able to give them that money.
Yeah, it's also like we shouldn't put the blame entirely on the government. It is also like a social issue that we also need to take responsibility.
Yeah. Here's a fact that I'm saying. This fact absolutely shocked me when I saw it. Okay, this is what it is. About 1 trillion single-use plastic bags are used annually across the globe. That's nearly 2 million every minute. Yeah, so 1 million single-use plastics and 2 million every minute. 1 trillion single-use plastics bags and 2 million every minute. That's so much plastic. I think only
that is appalling.
50% of that is getting recycled. The amount of plastic in the ocean, in landfill sites, on the floor, in the beach, there's so much.
That is. I mean, there's no words for it.
Yeah, it's just so much plastic.
Words can only do so much, really.
Yeah.
So
can't really do much justice.
How could we find ways to be able to reduce our plastic?
Maybe start reusing bags, reusing water bottles.
Yeah, we will. It does sort of take like I guess you could say like a step back in time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it will take a bit to get people to get used to it, but it's a step that we need to take in order to make the world better. And also maybe create bans on companies that produce the plastic, because I bet they're loving it, not caring about the environment, not caring about the effort.
They'll get by the time it really gets.
As long as they get the money in, they're fine.
Because they're going to be dead by the time climate change really ramps up.
Maybe the government creates bans on these plastic industries, so you're only allowed to make a certain amount of plastic depending on the country you're in.
And also, one last point. One thing really important to say is, no matter what we say, no matter what we're preaching here, we are all hypocrites. Like whoever you're talking, almost pretty much everyone who we could talk to in this conversation, they'd all be hypocrites.
Yeah,
because we are contributing to the problem way more than we think sometimes.
It's like a dilemma that I once heard. There's a bunch of homeless people. You want these homeless people to have houses. Are you going to build the houses? No, but you want them to have the houses. This is the same kind of thing here. You want to stop using all this plastic. Are you going to? Probably not.
Because that would result in you having to make a change.
Yeah, and humans are known for not liking change.
Yeah.
So I think to make a step in the right direction, start cutting down on the amount of plastic you use, start using reusable bottles and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's been a really interesting talk there today, lads. There's one of many in the IBC podcast. So
Yeah.
once again, from myself and everyone here at the IBC, we wish you a very good day. Bye bye.
Bye bye.